For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sundar Sarangan, and I lead the overall program for digital case study research, working with my colleagues, an extended team of ISG analysts and advisors. And today I have Prashant, who's going to join me in introducing our program for 2022, what's new or different in 2022 compared to what many of you may have seen with this program over the past years. And very importantly, part of what I'm going to talk to you about today is uh, how we are making this program easier for all of you providers to participate in this. As far as how the flow will go, I expect Prashant and I to take about 30 minutes to go over what we have as prepared content. And there will be time at the end for questions that we'd be happy to take. And just keep posting your questions in the chat stream and we will address them at the end, and we would also look at all of those questions and develop an FAQ for all of you to refer to as you participate in the program. So let me start with the history of digital case study research at ISG. This is our 5th year, and you've probably seen this, known this in different forms. It was the digital case study book for the first 3 years. Last year, you probably knew about it as Digital Case Study Awards. But it's really a foundation for what I would look at as case study driven research at ISG. And if we look back over the last 4 years, we've had close to about 150 winning submissions or standouts, looking at close to 500 case studies. And what's most important is this is research that shapes our thinking. It shapes our thinking about the market and about all enterprises and their adoption and evolution in the area of digital. It also happens to be a source of recognition for you and your clients, and I totally recognize why that's an important aspect of this program. So on that note, I'm going to focus on what we mean by case study research. And case study research really is all about contextual relevance. And that's what does that mean? And I'm going to invite Prashant to talk about that and throw some light on that and why he is so excited about case study research and specifically digital case studies and what he and his team value most from your case study submissions.
The market impression at the moment of ISG is that we value our time with our clients a lot, and that's true. We value our time with our providers equally, and I don't know whether this is coming across to the service providers and to the technology platform segments. We value this time a lot because a lot of value is created in that interaction. The first is not what just a provider can do, but what the providers has already done for client X, Y, and Z. This tells us also where the market is moving, where we should be actually market making for the providers, and the same holds good for technology platforms. As technology platforms come in, uh, this enables us to create buy versus build decisions as we run the sourcing. So as you bring in case studies to us, feel free to talk about not just what you did for a client, but what you observed and why did a manufacturing company do what it was supposed to do or what it asked you to do. How did you add value? How was that value actually recorded or argued? What was the business case? What was the ROI? How was the business case then realized? If you can go into this biz tech description of the case studies, it helps us as ISG not just market make for you, but also place you in the correct way. So we are very, very keen on not just having case studies from you, but having dialogues from you on the why of the case studies.
In the context of ISG's work with our enterprise clients, these are very important inputs. And to support this, the research framework that we've developed from an ISG research perspective is what I want to explain to you so you understand how we are looking at each individual case study and research that cuts across all of your different case study submissions. And what you're seeing on this slide is a highly simplified visual representation of that case study research framework. We look at every case study from three perspectives: the client situation. Was it a problem? Was it an opportunity? Or is simply wild, ambitious digital vision made to brought to life through your work with them? We want to understand your solution or the solution in the digital program, and specifically your role in that solution or program. We want to understand obviously the outcome and the business impact for the clients. So those are the three perspectives we look at, and then we look at six criteria that you see on the slide as for evidence of those six criteria in the case study you submit. Everyone agrees in the last 2 years of the pandemic, digital has accelerated. Most things digital have accelerated, and the notion of digital transformation itself has transformed. The pace and scale and ambition of digital programs in 2022 or the post-pandemic digital is very different from what it was before. And providers like you working with enterprise clients have had a big role to play in the acceleration of digital, and we surely want to hear more about that. And um, that is really what I want. I'm going to give it back to Prashant to explain in a way he does best on how he sees digital today, and hint to all of you, this is what we want to see from you in your case studies. So, Prashant, question back to you. How is digital different today from its pre-pandemic avatar and its origins 5 or 10 years ago?
See, the good thing about ISG is we don't think. We curate and we observe. So what we were observing 5 or 6 years ago was digital took birth in digital marketing. Now, after 5 or 6 years, we're seeing digital more ubiquitous and we see it more mainstream. So at the moment, we look at digital in two parts. First, from what are the technologies that are enabling? So these could be mainstream. It was ERP last years ago, but now it tends to be cloud, analytics, automation, engineering. Tomorrow it's going to be Web3. So think of it as the technology enabler angle. And much more interesting is the why of digital. So, why are our clients doing what they're doing? Is it to increase revenue, create new revenue streams, increase customer lifetime values? Most often, it is about increasing the optimization of operations. So, we're trying to bring these two forces together, and with this, remove the magic away from digital transformation.
Digital transformation, as you mentioned, Prashant, is not the same as natively digital businesses or business models. So, what are you seeing with clients? How do you see your clients approach this, and what is your advice to them?
No, that's a very good question, Sundar. Unfortunately, a lot of digital ideas start as proof of concepts, and these proof of concepts, in the worst case, happen in a lab or a competence center or something which is very far away from the main operations of an enterprise. So, when that idea comes to bear, it happens in it happens in the best case environment in greenfield environment. But when this thing has to be brought back into the mothership, it has to fit into the rest of what the enterprise already has. Now, you could call this legacy, but it's also the mainstream technology. So we see a huge difference between nailing it and scaling it. The more that both of these aspects are taken into consideration while building the idea or building the business case for an idea or the ROI of an idea, the better, because that's where it's going to look at mainstream adoption.
This is such an important distinction between greenfield and brownfield in the context of digital. Nice, interesting concepts. Love the words. Um, what you also implied there in your response there is that the field, green or brown, is not a lab or a greenhouse. Mainstream adoption, as you called out, is really about scaling digital or at scale digital operations. What do you see as Prashant, what do you see as the biggest opportunities, and what would you like to see more of in provider case studies in this context of scaling digital?
It is it is not just about the technology and the ROI, but each of these changes have something to do with people, process, structure, and technology. So I purposely avoid the word culture because culture is just a collection of habits, and habits can be changed in an organization. If you change the habits in an organization, you change the culture. So if you design with people, process, structure, and technology, as you're designing the ROI, it gets much easier to embed it. That's how you go from nailing it to scaling it.
We've talked about different dimensions of context when it comes to digital case studies. We've spoken about the greenfield and brownfield idea that Prashant explained. We talked about scale. Clearly, digital comes in many colors or shades or dimensions. So, if I were wearing my former hat of a marketer, I would be looking for all of these as angles to tell the story of digital case studies. And hint again, that's really what we want to hear from you. So, talking of angles, I will now say, Prashant, can you cover all the angles and make it a full 360 degrees of contextual relevance? Digital solutions and success, as you and I have often discussed, are not the result of off the shelf technology products or platforms. They're not standalone projects. They are often the coming together of an ecosystem. Again, how do you see that from your perspective and that of your clients?
That's a good question. At the highest level, it's good if an organization comes out of the not invented here mode and does things not in solitude but in collaboration with not just its partners but also the supply ecosystem, because it's not just about what a supplier can do with a client. It's what the supplier brings by working with other clients that you can bring to this organization. So there's that angle. The danger of this, of course, so that's the flip side. The other side of the coin is, a baker can only bake and a surgeon can only cut. So each supplier will come in with his or her angle at it. So the ability for an organization to say, okay, I'll co-create and co-invent, but also know how to structure and bring things together. When's the right time for a baker? What's the what's the right time for a surgeon? And how to orchestrate it, that's the new muscle which will have to be built. So partnership and collaboration is easy to say but difficult to do. What makes this more difficult is few years ago you used to have digital transformation programs which are defined for 4 to 5 years. Now once you go into continuous transformation, that's where you're thinking quarter to quarter. You're doing this collaboration and thinking not just once for the next 5 years, but you're doing this continuously. So you almost need to have a continuous muscle to do this. That's the new thinking you need on the buy side.
Now that all of you understand what we look at ISG look for in your digital case studies and why, let me shift to answering a question that many of you have or will be asked by your leaders. It is a lot of work. I know it. I've been on that side. It is a lot of work in pulling together client references that we ask for. It's not easy and it's a lot of orchestration. So why participate? What's in it for you? So let me get to that. Prashant said this better than I can say or show on a slide. This is your opportunity to shape our thinking about the market, and in doing that, our thinking about you and your role in the market. Getting more specific, your case studies are going to help you grow awareness and understanding about you among ISG advisors who advise billions of annual contract value every year for providers like you. And most of you know how or why that is important to you. This is also an opportunity for you to use those case studies to engage with or interact with the advisors to build greater trust and advocacy. Lastly, as marketers or go to market leaders, you know the importance of independent third party recognition, and what we called as the Digital Case Study Awards in 2021 will continue to represent that value proposition to you. Participation in digital case study research also feeds into everything ISG knows about you for our research and advisory work. All of your case studies become available to analysts who lead specific ISG provider lens studies. Any of you familiar with momentum and the CPQ process that feeds into our future source methodology know that case studies are a very important aspect of provider credentials. So for those of you who are not familiar, CPQ is candidate provider qualifications. So when ISG is advising an enterprise clients, we look for your credentials, pull it together for our advisors to talk about you with our clients. And that's in that context, case studies are extremely important. And then there is what we are developing now called the SmartX Radar. SmartX, that's a term that you probably may not have heard a lot about from ISG. It's new. And I'm again going to go back to Prashant. Prashant, over to you. Tell the world what you mean by SmartX.
Let me give you a slightly longer answer there, Sundar. ISG's role in the market has always been helping in sourcing of managed services. So this is where our history has been. It's where the market has seen us over the last decades. We've been watching the digital transformation topic grow over the last years. So 5 years ago, it was shining in patches. There were pockets of excellence everywhere. Now that it's getting ubiquitous and mainstream, we want to play the exact same role in the transformation space as we played in the managed services space. That is to take the magic away from it. And ISG takes the magic away from structuring and made magic away from by structuring and sourcing. This is what we want to play in this transformation area. But if you look at digital transformation, a lot of it is described with words like cloud first, mobile first, AI first. We need to go beyond that into what it means for each industry segment. So, for example, manufacturing would be looking at after sales through connected parts and services. So you see, digital transformation takes a business transformation angle. So therefore, what ISG is doing is looking at each industry segment and looking at the smart and intelligent aspects of it. So, to my example, smart manufacturing, smart insurance, smart banking, smart healthcare, smart life sciences. Therefore, that's why we call our practice SmartX, X
And
for industry segment.
could that also be smart HR and smart marketing like, are there other dimensions to smart?
That's a good question. There are some areas which I call horizontal verticals. So one of them which we have chosen to deep dive is engineering. Engineering, for example, cuts across discrete process manufacturing, gets into life sciences, and starts getting into media tech, media and high tech. So digital engineering is the one click deeper to SmartX, where we will go with niche offerings and niche providers to look at such niche areas. Marketing is something we're looking at closely because marketing, brand, collaboration, and engagement and experience is coming together. What we decide to call this new area remains to be seen.
So thank you, Prashant, and I hope you can stay and help me take more questions from folks about what you just shared and about the research that we're doing together here. So that takes me to the last part of the session, which focuses on how providers can participate in the digital case study research. And in describing the process, I'm also going to call out a number of significant changes that we are putting into place in 2022, all of which, again, at least in from a design perspective, are being done to make your participation easier, more meaningful, as it also more valuable to our research. So let me start with one big change. Unlike previous years, there will be no limits to the number of case studies that a single provider can submit this year. So, any of you who've participated in the last year, few years, the first difference that I want to call out is what I would say a highly simplified initial survey or form for you to submit a case study. The reason to do that is to really help you submit your case study based on what you already have readily available, that focuses on the three parts of the story that I alluded to earlier: the client situation, your digital solution, and the business impact or outcome for the client. Going back to something Prashant said, we at ISG curate, and as curators we want to have a more open mind, and that's kind of a big part of what's driving this change, and a more open framework to seeing what the provider landscape is doing in the digital space. And that's kind of why we're asking you to submit what you readily have, and then um, as we see what we get, we will come back to you. We will come back to you with questions, clarifications, and really to get to know the case study better in the context of what you share with us, rather than try to describe and find questions to capture everything up front. What we want to do is have you share what you have as a case study. We review it, we come back to you with clarifications, and that way, when you answer specific questions, it is in the context of the case study you shared with us, making it easier for you and more meaningful and valuable to us. So the one thing that will not is not changing much this year is the importance of the client validation to the process. We will still require a client, an enterprise client that you worked with, to validate your case study. That said, we are increasing the time you have available. You don't have to provide that upfront. You can provide it anywhere until we tell you that, hey, there is a deadline by which you need to bring us the client contact information. And so you have more time to get us the case study upfront, and then subsequently, as the case study progresses and we work with you to make the case study richer, you know that you will have a we will notify you on when we need the client validation completed. That way, the client will be validating your case study in the context of all the details you would have shared with us. Adding to that, we are also bringing in the option of, say, across a portfolio of case studies, you worked very closely with a technology partner or a SaaS provider on your solutions. You could kind of, as an optional add-on, also have ISG talk to your partner to get a truly ecosystem view of your capabilities and your work for your clients. And that's new in 2022. Another big change this year is what you've gone through in the previous years, is what I would call the fact check process or the authoring of the ISG written case study. Rather than do it at the end after it's been selected as a standout case study, what we want to do is, as soon as we complete client validation, we will work with you and in an iterative manner to get you the draft of the case study, have it fact checked, and then incorporate it into what I would call ingestion into the ISG research for CPQ, for the provider lens perspective. And that way, irrespective of its selection as a standout or not, we will have a ISG authored case study be moving into the research process for all of the ways that we would be using it, that I kind of spoke to earlier. So that's hopefully a benefit to you, benefit to us. And yes, we will be writing a lot more case studies together, but I think it's all in the better interest of all of you and for us, ISG. This also means that the process from selection to being announced will be much faster. So what we've kind of done is taken the process of, which used to, what I would think of, run in a batch mode, and made it run in much more of a flow mode. As case studies come in, we work with you, we improve them, get them validated, get them authored, get them fact checked, and have them ready. And that way, when we are ready to announce it, it moves much faster. Consistent with as we've done it in the past, you will have the option to request that client names not be published externally, but you will have to identify the client to ISG, and the client's validation will remain important, just like I just mentioned. Now, I would say you will have until the final announcement on deciding whether to name the client or not, as it's been our experience that some of you have been able to get clients to agree to being named once they're selected as a winner or a standout. Now, going from process to the timelines, the big change that I kind of mentioned is a change from a distinct deadline driven stage based model to a continuous open research model. What this means is submissions open in a couple of weeks and they won't ever close. We review work as you submit them and we give you feedback. We work with you, improve the case studies, validate it. I just mentioned that. And then at various points in time through the year, we will announce or let you know specific cutoff dates to kind of go into a final selection process for the winning standouts. This could be by topic, industry, region, and just keep in mind case studies that don't make the cutoff date will be considered in the subsequent cycle for review. But the key message is no specific deadline driven model, but a model that moves to a continuously open calendar. And that more or less completes what we have. Before we open the floor for questions, let me just reiterate the key points. I think what just to bring us all back on the same page, contextual relevance, that was the one big idea on what makes case study research so powerful and valuable to ISG and also makes this program particularly unique and in how it recognizes the role of the provider in coming up with the digital solutions. The program is designed to help you showcase your work both in the market and in the ISG advisory ecosystem. And the big changes: no limits on submissions, a simplified upfront submission, more time for client reference or validation, more iterative way to kind of develop the best possible case study, and a continuous, always open research. Now, time for questions. Thanks. Hey, while we wait for questions, we have a couple of questions that I can start with, but just another um, these are questions whether we answer them today or whether we answer them in an FAQ that we will compile and make available to all of you. Just this is a good way to capture all your questions and clarifications and make sure you know you have what you need from us. So let me go to the first question. Does the size, scale, and geography of the engagement have any weightage, or does it impact the selection criteria? And I think we this is in the when we were talking about Prashant and I were talking about the contextual relevance of a case study. I would say they are all factors, but this is a fairly comprehensive, I would say, not based on specific weightages and selection criteria. So we do look at size, scale, and geography, but we look at it in the context of the client situation and the solution. So it's not a bigger is better or something like that. So the way I would look at it is put it in the context. We want to see both the kind of a small project that is really cutting edge digital to a small digital innovation that could have made a huge process look and feel and work very differently to a completely transformative engagement that is large and complex in every dimension. So we want to see the variety of what's out there from a research perspective, and from the way we select it, we are looking for all of them. They are all factors that we consider, but they're not scoring criteria where something is better than the other. I hope that gives some clarity. Another question that is what are the different methods for validation? So the validation will be, and again, it's a longer question. I'm not going to read out all of it, but um, validation is essentially an email based survey. We'll send a link to a client who responds, and It's not very different from how it was in the past. Probably the one big change that I want to say is this time the survey will be far less generic and far more specific to the submission. So we will actually capture the spirit of the case study in the survey itself and have the client agree, disagree, and comment on the submission. And so the validation that, as I mentioned, will be in the context of the submission rather than just a client validation on their experience working with the provider. The questions are starting to flow in more. I'm going to try and keep up. Um, Okay, the rolling timeline, that seems to be both two couple of questions right now around rolling timeline and the time frame. So the case, let me take the second one. Is there a time frame the project had to have taken place? So I would say anything, and this is consistent with how we have looked at it, it has to be in an active implementation and execution phase in the last 24 months. So it could have started 8 years ago, 12 years ago. It could be a long-standing relationship, but there was an active component of work performed in the last 24 months with outcomes that are in the last 24 months. So that's kind of going back from a time frame perspective on when the project should be completed or should have taken place. So it could be an active relationship, but there are significant milestones and outcomes to talk about in the last 24 months. um, the rolling timeline is, so to have things considered for this year's award, can you go through that timeline? So what we're essentially saying is this is probably the way we're envisaging it is this is your way as a provider to share your case studies with ISG. Digital case study research is kind of the bigger umbrella. The awards are just one component of it. We would love to see all your case studies come in on a continuous basis. Think of it, and I'm just making updates right now, but we would probably say end of May. And we'll notify you that end of May we're going to get a team of advisors and experts to make a choice and select the key winners in a couple of technology categories. And so now, if you don't make the deadline, we will probably have another round of judgment or a decision making at say the end of July and another end of September. But the idea is that we will keep receiving your case studies, working with you to improve them and including them in the standouts, because we're not exactly looking for the top three or top five, but we are holding a certain threshold where it makes the cut. The way we will run the process is the case study that made the cut in July would have been good enough to have made the cut in a subsequent round of submission. So when we look at it over a calendar year, it is a standout case study. And so that's kind of how the rolling timeline will play out. And happy to connect offline if you need to understand this better. To manage. So on the client validation, it will be only via a survey. The question was, is it via a survey or any calls or no, it will just be via a survey. Um, Another question, did you say if whether the case study would be added to your CPQ? Yes, that's a big part. That's always been a part of the case study research at ISG is all the vetted case studies become part of the provider CPQ credentials. Question is what type of questions customers will get in the survey? Can you share some? So what we will all do when is once we send out a once we are at the point of client validation, you will actually get to see the survey that your client will be responding to. So we will share that with you. You'll be sharing the template to share the case study. Yep, the question was whether we'll be sharing a template to share the case study. We're actually um, this is a big part of the change, and I didn't want to go into the mechanics of it, but for any of you who participated in previous years, it was a fairly exhaustive survey instrument or a template What we will be doing right now is simplifying it to about 10 or 12 questions, or we have simplified it to about 10 or 12 questions. And we're saying you don't have to fill up a comprehensive, exhaustive survey instrument. And if you think there's a prepared case study or something readily available that answers it, just place it or kind of answer it in the context of those 10 questions that we want to know about a case study, and we will come back to you, and it'll be more iterative between us and you to make sure we have everything we need to consider the case study as part of your credentials and for the awards component of it. I think I have run through all the questions, and again, it's an ongoing program, so I'm around to take questions even after, and most of you can have my contact information. You can reach out to me. So if we have no more questions, then we can give everybody 5 minutes back and wrap up. And thank you all for attending, for your questions, and for your continued interest in this program.